So we do an interesting beaded extension technique that we're not going to talk much about right now because it's all about the cut. But over the next few minutes, we're going to cut these two ladies' hair extensions. And what I'm going to do is something I've developed as a 5-step hair extension cut technique. It's the 5 areas. I don't know which way to face. I've never taught to a circle, so I want to pan the crowd, but you're everywhere. So I want to do the 5 steps. I'm going to throw it back to oh, listen. We're not using capes because we want you to, no, we just forgot. I was going to come up with something real fancy. We just forgot them. So I said, no, we're not going to use them. We're just going to dust ourselves off when we're done. We're just going to cut with no capes while we're up here. So Nikessa, as you can see here, let me just spin her around real quick. She's a little ultra modern, a little trendy. She's got one side of her head completely shaved and her hair's pretty long. It's about past the shoulder blades. But everybody wants more, so we're going to blend that in, and it's not going to be a lot of cutting at all. We're going to go through all 5 techniques on her. Hers is a little bit longer, and I'll go through those one by one, but I'm going to throw the stage back to you for a minute. Go for it. So what I have found with cutting length so often with extensions, that very first thing I found too often in the mirror, the client comes in, and how do they show you how long they want to cut it? So step 1 is cutting the length. I'm going to go through the 5 steps real quick so you guys can kind of see the future. Step 1 is going to be cutting length, and I'm going to show you where and why and how. Step 2 is going to be what? This is my son Brennan, by the way. He thinks he's going to take over the business one day, you know, and so he works for free right now. He doesn't work for free, you're right. I didn't even know you were here, Leslie, but I know that laugh. So step 2 is framing the face. Step 3 is something about layers, blending the client's hair in. 4 and 5 are both ends. 4 is going to be the ends of the extensions. 5 is going to be the ends of their hair. So I always say trust the process. Go through the 5 steps before you start judging how terribly it blends. But none of these steps replace color matching and where the hair goes on the head. And I think those are 2 of the biggest challenges. My most watched YouTube video from like 7 years ago is a hair extension cut. Second most watched YouTube video on the Profitable Stylist, shameless plug, is placement of extensions. And it matters no matter what technique you're doing. Where you put them is going to make a big difference on how good they look. These 2 girls have pretty long hair. Their extensions start pretty high up. You barely have to cut them. They look pretty good already. Of course, I didn't sabotage myself and put extensions on a very short hair girl in front of all you people. But we do it pretty often in the salon and try real hard and do an okay job, but it's never the best looking extensions. So here what I always find is if I part it down the center, too often, too many girls, they have their hair in the back and they go and they flip it to the front and they say, I want it here. Or they're trying to point to the back to that length and it's hard to do, right? And the interpretation is always wrong. So I had a few girls just throw it in the front right here and they pinched off a section of hair right in here and they were like, this is how long I want it. I said, just hold your finger there above or below, and I cut it. And so then I could judge from there what happens in the back. But I just got better and better at it, made a cleaner part through the center in the back, and the only challenge I found here was that if I block her view in the mirror and I come up here to start cutting, she wants to see what I'm doing and just messes up all the layers, right? So when I get here, I stop focusing here and I say, look straight at yourself in the mirror. I get this combed straight. Don't look down. And this is where I cut my length. And I like to break it up with a point cut, but I'm going to just prove that I taught somebody how to do this technique and it actually works. So he's going to do it. So that'll be the first step. And then we'll talk about the second one in a minute. So even on this asymmetrical placement pattern in her hair, I still puttered it down the middle, but as you can see, we got a lot less hair on one side than the other. And what that does for me, did you get the length cut over there, Brennan?
Yep.
Did you want to introduce yourself? We kind of skipped you, huh?
Hey guys, I'm Brennan. I'm Bernard's son, and I plan to take over the company one day.
We did not practice this shtick. We've just been living together forever, so he kind of learned how I joke. So look, show them what happens when you take that front and then you throw it all to the back. Some of you guys already see the future. I
cleaned it already.
Right? So when you throw it to the back like that, because the center traveled so far to be in the front, it's going to be a little longer, right? And the sides didn't travel as far, so they're a little shorter. So it gives a little bit of a natural, rounded look. Let's get some of that hair off your booty. There we go. So that's another thing I had to learn as a straight man with women cutting in the front is I have to be careful what I'm touching up here, right? And so I purposely like grab hair at the collarbone or below and get all the hair in it and come out a little bit, but I'm trying to cut it natural fall. So backs of my hands for one thing, so I don't look like I'm trying to touch somebody where I shouldn't. And then the same thing in the back. Some of you guys in the room know what I'm talking about. You've got hair on the client. The comb is the little safer way to remove some hair that shouldn't be there. But the very first thing that happens in the back is it's slightly rounded. It just looks a little more natural. And I know the trend is a little more straight, flat, and blunt. So I might come back and blunt it off or leave it like that. Or maybe I use this to go even more V pattern, because I tell you the trend is either real flat and solid or it's super pointy these days. I'm having a lot of people come in wanting a little bit more of a V look in the back. So I'll do that. So the second thing that we're going to do is blend those sides. You already did it?
Nope.
All right, so let's just blend the sides. And let me tell you how I blend the sides. This is a little trick I learned from years ago from Scott Cole, you can sit down, with Paul Mitchell. And it was just a genius little technique. He noticed that the gear or the swivel of the scissor being right here, he's demonstrating too, from there to my fingers is going to stay the same every single time, right? But where the cut happens, if I do little bitty cuts deep inside the scissor like this, it's closer to the swivel right here. So this little bitty movement of about 1/4 of an inch is about a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch here. And so I will cut with that part of the scissor, because if I make that same tiny movement here about 1/4 of an inch, it's about a 1/2 an inch to an inch cut. So it's hard to do 1 and 2 and 3 hair cuts with the tip of my scissor, because I can't have as much control as I can have right here. So that's how we're both going to blend throughout that front, is just barely opening and closing, but with a wide mouth. And you get a lot more control. So I'm not sliding or slithering. I'm just cutting 1 or 2, 3 hairs at a time. I think I'm going to have to get those shears. But we have been using the old-fashioned 4420s forever as a blending shear. They do a pretty good job, and this technique I'm talking about right now. But in step 3, so we did length, we did the blend, frame in the face, as much or as little as needed. And yes, I know a lot of you guys use razors, and that's great too. I teach so many classes, I find when I put a razor in people's hands that never used one before, it's terrible. And then people that know how to use them. But with scissors and thinning shears, I have a little bit more control. But if you are good with a razor, use a razor. It's super fast, a lot faster than the techniques I'm using here. But this next technique is this. I'm taking vertical sections and pulling out like this. You don't have to move at all. And what I'm doing is I'm looking for where I feel down the head. I'm looking for the top layer of, there's my first weft right there, right? So if I took her hair away, now her hair's pretty long, right? So this hair, well, you can see how blunt it is. It should show on top the extensions. That's step 4 or 5. We're going to take care of that later. But right now, we know that that falls to right here. So the blend from the client's hair down through the extensions is the next step that needs to be taken care of. Whether it's the shear that they have, a regular shear, a thinning shear, a razor, that's the place, right? That's the next step. Right here, we need to start to blend right there over the top. And we're not going to get all the way to the very ends. We're going to handle that in step 4 and 5, but we're going to get close. And so I literally just go in and grab vertical sections, kind of freehand. And if I need to keep checking, I do. But I know where it is now. Look, it started falling out right there. So that's the place to start using that technique where I'm just cutting little hairs, just layering right over the top. Take it, Brennan, and I'm going to do it over here and be quiet for a minute. I love what you just said about taking off too much hair, because isn't that where we get our experience? Because I messed up a lot of times and took off too much hair in the early days. I had clients that would come in and get extensions from me because I was great at putting extensions in, and then say, but don't cut them. I'm going to my friend at another salon somewhere else, or somebody else in my own salon, which is more embarrassing. And it was mostly because, just the truth, right? Is mostly because I would look at these ends. Now Nikessa here, she does not want me to take much off. She's like, I said, I'd really like to take it about here, but could take it here and leave you a lot of length, and it'll look okay. It's a little thin on the ends. And she goes, I'm that girl. Leave as much as possible. So sure, I'll do that. But on Rose, you see how it looks a little blunt on the ends, and the very first thing I wanted to do on those ends was I wanted to use a thinning shear, a texture shear, and I just want to chop, 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 and just keep doing that bottom until it looks right. And by the time I got there, I had taken out too much in the sections that didn't need it, so I wasn't really separating my sections. And this is where a big accidental what is that? Aha. I was going to say ha-ha. I meant to say aha moment for me happened. this vertical section, I'll turn a couple times so you all can see it, but I took this vertical section and watch how gravity works against me. I pull it out like this. I'm pulling this section out now. You can kind of see where all the extensions are in there, right? And I kind of collapse it till it fits between my fingers because my fingers are only so long. And I get to this point where I see there's her ends, right? And then everything, when my comb starts going out, is the extensions. And when I get there, it all kind of fell and collapsed. And I couldn't see anymore where I should cut. So I used gravity in my favor. And when I got to about this point, I turned sideways so I can still see it and still work with that top edge. Whether, again, I'm using a thinning shear to start blending over that top edge, where it's not quite, I don't need to take out all of this, but even within the ends, I can see this bottom extension is the thick point that is making me look a little too thick down there. But before, when I would just do this on everything, I was thinning out all of this that didn't need it. So I'm doing a little blend over the top, and I might need this one extension here to look a little more natural and not take all the weight out of here. So I got to start doing my extension cuts again. So you do the same thing. But, I mean, I learned the hard way, right? So I'll just take a few vertical sections and do that same thing. You do it, Brandon. Go ahead.
Aye, aye.
So let me just say this real quick, and then we'll take some questions also.
This is your 4-minute one.
Okay. Who, was that God? Somebody tell my wife I loved her. I only got 4 minutes left. 22-inch hair is what we use on both of these models. 18 is probably our most common used length hair. We have 10, 14, 18, and 22.
18.
You do have some 18 on her.
18 on all.
Only 18. Oh, our
all 18
original
on
goal was
hers.
22. I didn't realize they switched it on me. Oh, impressive. Okay.
It's a color issue.
It looks pretty long.
I know.
We had trouble finding 22-inch in the right color, he's saying. So to get the right color,
We
had to
have
put
it.
18.
We just didn't bring it.
We just didn't bring it. That's
Yeah.
right. So we, okay, so 18 and 22-inch. We sell a beaded weft that we'll be showing at 2:45 tomorrow in Austin too. And I'll talk about a beaded weft, our beaded strand, and our beaded topper, a no-shave technique for putting hair on top of the head. And all going in with beads. And we kind of pride ourselves in putting a 12-inch wide weft faster than anybody else out there. There's a video that's kind of going viral where he's being videoed putting the weft in just under 7 minutes. But that was 7 years ago. We're doing them in 2.5, 3 minutes now. I'm not saying you should rush it on a client, but on stage we do for fun, you know, and for competition. But in the salon, if you take 10 or 12 minutes to put one 12-inch wide weft in, we literally can take a full weft out and put it back in, or I should say 2 wefts and a pack of strands is our average full head. We're doing in about 35, 45 minutes. So within an hour, you can take a full head of extensions out, put it back in, not necessarily have to go to the shampoo bowl, wet the hair, dry, style, although I like to do that. He does not. He takes a weft out, re-beads it, puts it right back in. So other than a tape-in technique, it's one of the fastest techniques, but we use a beaded technique. And so come see us in Austin 2:45 tomorrow. And if anybody has any questions right now, we're open to answer them until Janine runs us off the stage. Thank you, guys.